So I actually met our lawyer at Oktoberfest, and they have the last day, it's liquid networking, where they rent a whole day Oktoberfest tent. And luckily, he was sitting next to me in the tent at one of the networking sessions. And I was telling him about how awful it is to work with IP lawyers. And he was like, I'm actually an IP lawyer.
Hi, I'm Martin, your host, and welcome to another episode of Rockets and Radars. Today we are having a beer chat with Thomas Sinn from DCUBED. And trust me, this is a story you will want to hear. Picture this. A guy started by 3D printing parts out of frustration with a RocketLab mission, and now he's shipping hardware to the International Space Station. Thomas' journey from a basement in Bavaria to building one of Germany's most exciting space companies is packed with practical insights. So, grab your favorite drink, get comfortable, and let's dive into an honest conversation about building in Europe's space sector.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Hey Thomas, you started by 3D printing a release device out of frustration on a RocketLab mission, and now you are shipping hardware to ISS. So let's chill down with coffee and water, or whatever our listeners' favorite drink is, and let's hear how a guy from Bavaria built one of the Germany's most exciting space companies. Before we get into the story, I would love to hear what is DCUBE in one sentence, so also listeners get into the context of what we are talking about here.
Yeah, so thank you very much for inviting me, Martin. DCUBED in one sentence. So DCUBED is doing everything that needs to be small in the rocket and big in space. So we are a company doing mechanisms that release satellites, but also doing deployable structures like solar arrays, antennas for the new space ecosystem.
Back in 2018, when you were working with your 3D printer, we'll get into that. Did you ever imagine where would you end up after a few years since then?
Yeah, I actually never, when we started it, I never thought it could be that big or that fast, so big, because back then it was just a side project. I just saw that these release devices that we are building were not existing in the market. And then I started building them in my free time on the weekends, just next to my normal job. And I just thought it's more like a hobby, because it was something similar that I was doing during my PhD. You do the research, do the work mostly in your free time, but then you never know how big it gets. So that was actually something that I did not imagine that would be that big.
Okay, let's get into the story. You grew up by the European rocket test site. I'm very curious if that was the thing that sparked your space obsession.
Yes, that was the main thing that was driving me in my youth. So I was growing up close to Lampolshausen, where they test all the Ariane engines. And when I was growing up, there were the tests where the windows were shaking and the smoke was coming out of the forest. For me, it had to be space all the time. So I actually started also studying space engineering. I first did not believe that such a cool study course is even available. I first thought of going to mathematics or physics, but when I was then there for like a trial study, then I saw that this actually existed. I was like, wow, it's amazing. And from then on, I was always hooked with space. So also at a young age, I visited all the DLR centers. I went to NASA, to the Kennedy Space Center. It is just something that drives my passion to imagine building technology that is going to the moon, going to Mars, or also going to these spaces, like the final frontier, as they say.
For the young generation, if there are any listeners that are still studying, let's say engineering, and they have a few years until they finish their thesis, what would be your pitch to them to get into the space industry after the studies?
Yeah, I think you can even start earlier when you're in school, because there is already where the passion can really start. Actually, It's also funny. In my same school, in my high school, was also a couple of years before me, the German astronaut Alexander Gerst. So he studied in the exactly same school as me, but it was not like a space school or so. It was just a normal technical high school. So what I could recommend is be passionate, do experiments, and look what's out there in space, because space is actually combining everything from technology to human interaction to life science.
Yeah, precisely, right?
Yeah.
I think space is one of the biggest laboratories, which it is actually. You can actually develop any technology. You have an environment where people haven't tested the technologies before, and I think that's where the innovation is being born. So if there are any engineers listening, this is the industry you want to be in.
Yes, because exactly the space industry is, or space engineering is like a combination of everything, because when you want to send astronauts to the moon, you need to think, okay, how you get them with a rocket? What are the chemical components you need to make a rocket go very fast? Then it's like you're on a trip to the moon. It's like, how do you keep your astronauts alive? How do you make food for them? How they should go on the toilet? How is it also from a psychological standpoint that they don't go crazy, because they will be tackling a small thing for a long time? And then it's also for longer missions to Mars. So how do you maybe grow then vegetables? Are you bringing a cow with you? And then also coming back, how do you survive the re-entry? So it's fascinating.
Precisely. So it's not only for engineers, but also for biologists and anybody that is in sciences, I believe so. And the more people we can get into the industry, the more innovation is being born.
Yes.
And the quicker we get into a place of the market where we can actually make money faster than right now, which really takes time to get into that.
And actually, now is one of the best times to get fascinated about space, because it's now 60 years ago since Apollo landed on the moon, and it got a little bit quiet with the space shuttle and so. But now there's actually a lot of private companies really opening up space for everyone. You have SpaceX, you have Blue Origin, and you have hundreds and thousands of other companies like ours. So that was not possible 15 years ago. When I was finishing my studies 15 years ago, I could only go to one of the big companies or go to the agency, and then just doing the standard work over and over. But now there's actually rockets flying into space that actually get back and are caught in midair. It's crazy what's happening right now.
Precisely. Companies like RocketLab. And I'm very curious, how did you get from academia to RocketLab? What was the story behind that?
Yeah, so I studied in the US. So I studied first in Stuttgart because they had a space engineering course. But then also wanted to go very quickly to the States, because in the States is where most of the space stuff is happening. And there I actually met one of my former classmates that went to SpaceX. I went to RocketLab, and that then 5 years later gave me the opportunity to fly something on RocketLab. So it was like a small deorbiting device that I was developing at my old company. And there we did not find a small release device. And when we brought it in our hand luggage down to New Zealand, and we had 3 weeks of driving around, we really thought, okay, what do we do with this knowledge that this thing doesn't exist? And there was like quite some brainstorm, and then we said, okay, let's start our own company.
Before we get further, I would love to get into the background of how RocketLab looked back then. Because you said they were still based in New Zealand, where they actually started. And
Yes.
I'm very curious if you had any favorite stories or memories from that.
So one of the nicest things I remember from RocketLab was when I was down in New Zealand, and we actually came in for the integration, and we had a photo op with Peter Beck. So it was right out of their old facility, where it was quite small, close to the airport. And we had like this big reflective sail with us, and the sun was shining on it, right? And he got all the reflection and he had a very hard time with opening the eyes while we did the photo shoot.
Yeah.
But he only told it to me afterwards. But it was nice meeting Peter Beck for the first time there.
And by the way, why RocketLab and not any of the incumbents that were already existing on a global space market?
So the thing was, back then I was working at a medium-sized company in Munich, where I was the section head of the orbit sales. And the problem is with space hardware, if you don't bring it to space, it doesn't get the flight heritage and will be bought. And so I looked around for a long time to find flight opportunities for that. And only through my friend, that knew back from, I think, a couple of years, he was the mission manager there. And he said, okay, if you can bring it down in 3 months, you get the ride, because they were back then not certified as a NASA launcher, and they had to kick a NASA payload off, and we got the spot. The only requirement that they just said, it needs to be down in New Zealand in 3 months. And there was just like the opportunity to get something into space in a very short amount of time, because 3 months is very quick. Normally with SpaceX and others, you do 6 months, or with all the new micro launchers, who knows when they will be launching. But with them, it was just like, okay, the rocket is going, you have a spot, you just need to bring it down to New Zealand.
At that point where you realize that the device, the release device, could be a real business, what were your actual thoughts?
Yeah, so in the beginning, it was more a pain point for me, that I needed this device, because I needed it for my deployables that I was using, or that I was developing in my old company. It took quite some time to really realize that it could be a business case, because it was, I think, shortly before Christmas 2018, where I just thought, okay, there must be a solution out there. So I bought a 3D printer in the Prime sale shortly before Christmas. I used all my Christmas holiday to put something together. And it was quite simple devices, but I was like, it's not so difficult. And then it was like, with every competition we won, every prize money we won, just said, okay, we continue doing this. Maybe there's more to it. And I remember, I think the first prize we won was 2,000 euros prize money. We're like, oh my God, it's so much money. We can do so much stuff with it. And we bought like more hardware, like tools. And the funny thing was that when I was growing up, I actually never thought that I would have my own company, or that I will be working in a startup. Because my brother, he had multiple startups. He was studying IT, and he just went into doing his own startups. And I just thought, who is so crazy for taking so much risk and not having a 9-to-5 job where you can just do something cool? But yeah, I had to work 5 years to realize what are really the upsides.
While building the first prototype, have you had any big technical challenges to build it? It seems that you built it on the side back then.
Thing how we did it is we started with the simplest design that we could. So there was not very complex machines or anything needed, because we knew that we don't have enough money to buy really like a tool shop or so. It needs to work also on your coffee table. And some of the biggest challenges that we had is getting the right materials. So at first still now, our release actuators are using shape memory alloys. And so we just bought them on eBay in China. Then my old professor in America sent us some. And we just combined it together. Some were working, some were not working. But when we got them all to work, we thought, okay, this is now it. Now, with having now this company for almost 6 years and all the trials that we did in the development, we just saw that we're actually quite lucky to get it working in the first place, because there are so many things that could go wrong that we just realized at a later stage.
let's get into the timeline. So you had a 3D printed part and you wanted to create a business, and then you did create a business. What happened after that?
Yeah, so we started with these 3D printed. I still have them, I think, in my office now. I think we need to make a museum of DCUBED at one point, where it's like the first actuators that we built. So after building the first plastic parts, we actually got, with like the prize money, like the 2,000 euros that we got, and some money from the European Space Agency, because we got accepted to ESA big. We were able to do some real prototypes, also metal prototypes. And there we advanced very quickly with also trials, but also advertising it. So we got a homepage. We went on conferences to present the product that we thought the industry needs. But it turns out that a lot of customers came to us. It's nice that you do it in green, but if you do it in red, we would buy it. So we took a lot of requirements from different customers and then came up with the product that the market really needs. But then it was actually, I think the first order we got in 2019 was from MIT. And that really changed the whole story of the company, because that was the first time where we actually got an order from outside that was not just for our problem solution. So they were just like, okay, we really want your part, and it will be on a 2 spacecraft mission, and it was crazy.
How did it feel when you got that first customer?
It felt unreal. It felt, especially because it was the MIT, because we're a small German startup. Back then we were like 3.5 people, so 4 people. And then we got an order from MIT. And back then we were like working from the basement. Because of COVID, we had to be kicked out of our labs and offices at the university. It was a mix of feelings. At one point, it was like complete euphoria, because it's like, wow, we got this first mission. We'll be flying on a spacecraft. And on the other side, it was like, oh my God, we got the first order. Now we also have to prove to external sources that this thing is working.
I'm very curious about the whole story of how did you get MIT sign a contract? Do you have any thoughts or advice on how did you actually get them on board?
That's a good question, because that's now almost 6 years ago. So one of the recommendations that I can really give is go on the market, go advertising your products early. Because the danger is, if you're advertising a finished product, that you actually design it without a market being there. Because sometimes the market assessments that we do is wrong. And so we followed this approach that we have a solution that is working, but it's not perfect yet. So it's maybe just 80% there, but let's advertise it and see how much traction we got. That was also with MIT. They were just so unhappy with the solutions that are out there that they said, okay, we'll give this new company, this startup out of Germany, a chance. And we'll help them to succeed, because the solutions out there are just not good enough, and they were not very happy with the price that they had before.
How did they know that you exist?
We're still trying to figure this out completely. Yeah, they actually searched for us online, and they found our website. So they were really searching for release actuators. Then we popped up, because back then we did not have a marketing or anything. We just published everything a little bit on LinkedIn, on our webpage. We're not on all the sponsored catalogs. Yeah, so I think I was quite lucky that we got it.
This is very interesting, because the previous guest, the founder of Leap Space, they got ISRO, Indian Space Agency, also by them finding their website and calling them directly. So I guess the advice here would be make a website as soon as you can.
Yes, and put data on it, put pictures on it, put information on it. Also, if it's not perfect, if it's 80% there, because nobody knows what you're doing if you don't publish it somewhere. It's also the idea in my previous company back then. It was all it's space hardware. It is highly confidential. Nobody can know about it because it's high tech. But it's like, but who should buy it if they don't know that it exists?
How do you then balance the confidentiality and the prevention of stealing your IP towards communicating that you're doing something?
Yeah, it's a balance that needs to be found. What we realized is that it does not make sense to go too deep into the confidentiality as long as you have flight heritage or so. Then your product will be anyway chosen, also if the USP is better. We also saw that from a few early customers that they try to do it by themselves, but it was not so easy. So they actually came back because we delivered peace of mind to them. So I would recommend to not take your technology too serious, because if you're too confidential about it and you say, you can only see it when you sign the NDA, especially with bigger companies, it's like, then you already lost the foot in the door.
That's a very good advice. Thanks for sharing that.
Maybe one additional thing here is our main confidentiality, the main secret sauce is like in the procedures, in the tolerances, how something is built together. And that makes it functional. And so the design is not really confidential. We even patented it, but also when you patent it, you open it up to everyone because everyone can see what you're doing. So we realized that it's actually good to bring the design out there to patent it because then you can openly talk with any customer about it. So we had, I think, like 3 years meeting with a bigger prime customer. And they wanted to know how does it actually work? How is the inside? Because for them to understand how it works makes also the whole application easier because then they see what are the constraints with it. I mean, we were just able to pull up the patent, the drawings, and then we could go really into deep. And they were so happy about it.
Okay, so we mentioned patent a few times. How did you secure your first patent? And also, did you use the SpaceTech money to acquire that patent, or have you tried a different way of acquiring this?
So I think a little bit of the first patent was supported by SpaceTech. Important thing was here to find a very good IP lawyer. So we tried actually one before that was not good at just tried to get the most money out of us as possible. So now we actually have one that we invite every couple of months to us that he can look over all the tech that we are doing. And he does the assessment where it actually makes sense to patent something and where not. Because the thing is, a patent is always very expensive. So depending on the patent, it's between 5 and 30K. And you should really think wisely where you want to, if you want to spend it. So there's a couple of funding schemes that support it. So we got a German one that is called Vipano. I know that also the European Commission has some support things for patents, but it's really to question if a patent makes sense, because a patent only makes sense for the nation where it's used. So we now need to make patents in Germany, France, US, India, China, and every patent application is another cost. And if someone really wants to use the product, they can just change something slightly and then it's something new. So we saw it more for IP protection towards investors, having it upon their patents, but not really for IP protection to help our business.
You experience both bad IP lawyers and good ones. What is your playbook on getting the right one? you went through both of the sides.
Yes. So with the bad one, we started. We had very limited money back then for patents, and every meeting that we had with him was about, this costs that much, that costs that, and we have to do everything. So it needs to be a very good relationship, in my opinion. So I actually met our lawyer at Oktoberfest. It was actually the startup festival Bits and Pretzels here in Munich. And they have the last day, it's liquid networking, where they rent a whole day Oktoberfest tent. And luckily he was sitting next to me in the tent in one of the networking sessions. And I was telling him about how awful it is to work with IP lawyers. And he was like, I'm actually an IP lawyer.
The advice here would be make decisions based on the human aspect, right?
Yeah.
How do you
if you
work with the
feel
person?
something is off, if you don't feel a personal connection to them, don't go further, because what we learned is you don't want to change lawyers too often, because to make really good contracts, to make really good patent applications, they need to know what the company is about. And that you can only get through a longer relationship, because then it actually makes it also quicker to write patents. Because he already has the mindset, he sees the application, and he knows exactly what is important for a new space application, for example.
Awesome advice again. Okay, so at this point in your journey, you were powered by grants. Am I right? Around 2019.
Yes, a couple of grants. So it was ESA Big. Then we also got in Germany, it's called Exist. It gives up to 3 founders some money for salary and some money for developing things. And that was actually also the reason why I then quit my job, because I realized after roughly 1 year, if I really want to bring this to success, I need to do it full time and nothing else. And I was like, I got it. I quit my job. And that was actually the first day in the startup was this liquid networking at Bits and Pretzels at Oktoberfest. And back then I thought, okay, this is really what it's about to have a startup. So you go partying and you're with all your startup people, with the VCs. That's like, okay, now it's starting to take off. Little that we know that we only had 2 months and then COVID came.
If you, by the way, started again from scratch now, what would be your approach on getting the grants as fast as you can?
I would start actually with the same way, with the Exist grant, to get some salary at least for a year, and then probably early grant, the same as ESA Big, because there you also get very good contacts to the European Space Agency. You get also 25K to build something, and that should last for a year. So you have a year where you don't necessarily need a customer or so, where you can really focus on getting the product ready and also learning on how to actually manage a company, to build a company.
Regarding ESABIC, you mentioned that network helped you a lot. Would you give you any advice to other space founders that are thinking about getting ESABIC, or they just got it right now? What is the best way how to squeeze as much value out of the ESABIC program as possible?
I think it's both. It's money and it's also support. I would say that it's up to the founders to get a maximum out, because you are in the driving seat. You need to push. It's not them bringing your company forward or accelerating the company. Only if you invest time, if you really know what you want, you will actually get something meaningful out of these accelerator. Doesn't matter if it's ESA Big, if it's Y Combinator or so. It's only what you bring in, you can also get out. So only if you commit really time to it. And especially for the ESA Big, I would recommend to very early trying to also get bigger European Space Agency grants. So they're also helping there. Normally, I think you can get quite easily a few 100K to start. That is something I would recommend.
Awesome. So let's talk about COVID. As you mentioned, you got into this phase. How did you live through it? What were your thoughts back then? You had to move your company to the basement.
Yes.
How did the whole company reacted to this moment?
So it was actually very weird because, as I said before, I just quit my job and I was thinking, okay, now it's the social life, startup life starts where you with your fellow founders in the evenings with a beer or at a barbecue. There was also a lot of these startup events. It was like the Hello Tomorrow and all these very picturesque events. Then actually COVID came, where before we set up a nice workshop at the university, we also had a nice office. And then we had to leave within 1 or 2 days. So we even bought like new machines that were still in the basement. And for 1 or 2 months, we worked completely remote. But that's very hard as a hardware startup to work remote. So we said, okay, we need to come together because otherwise it's not taking off. So back then I got a house close to Munich and the basement was free. I just said, okay, we empty out the basement and move the company in. So I had the colleagues around every day. We had lunch together. Sometimes in the evening, we were sitting on the couch and still the founder was coming out of the basement. I was like, you're still here? I didn't know that you were still here.
How big was the basement, by the way?
That's a very good question. I would say like maybe 30 square meters or so. So we had
30?
4 people, 40, yeah, 30, 40 square meters. So we actually moved all the 3D printer in. We had all the machine, like small turning machines. We had the whole assembly built up there. Also, sometimes my cats came in, and when they came in, you also had cat hair in all the parts for a while. So you see, it was really space hardware what we are doing there.
But at least now you can say that you started in a basement.
Yes, so I have this check mark for the startup. So just to wrap this up with COVID. So one of the good things with COVID was that there was actually no travel. So there was no conference, no meeting, nothing. And you could also do not much in your free time. That actually gave us time to just work on the company and the product. So now sometimes I feel like it's like so many events all around the world where you travel there, where you have to travel there. But then back then it was like no one was traveling. There was no disadvantage of not being somewhere. So it was really nice to just focus on the product. It was really annoying to always be with the mask. And also, I think it was like the Christmas of 2020 when it was impossible to get out. But we said, okay, we still need to celebrate Christmas at the company. So we closed all the curtains and we're like all the light off and did a little bit of a Christmas celebration. So that was the...
Oh, yeah, okay. Now I think we can say that.
Exactly. I think now it's okay.
Okay, let's get into your very first institutional money. Can you tell us more about that? After having all of those grants and right now we are in a COVID crisis, how did you get your first institutional check?
So the thing was that when we are having Exist, we also focused on getting a VC money. So that was back in 2020. And we came with very crazy ideas. Back then we also said, okay, VC money is only for like the crazy ideas, the ones that go very far.
It's true.
Yes. And then we were like, with these small release devices, it's probably very hard to make this crazy idea. So I've been starting working in space solar power in 2012. So bringing energy down from space with collecting it in space with solar rays and then beaming it down with microwave and lasers. And that is the idea that we went into the VC race back then. But one of our lead investor for the first round said, this is too crazy. But the small actuator, that could be actually something that can be big. So I like it that you have this big vision, but for the first market entry, try a small thing. So we actually got the VC money to do this, but we always said, we still want to follow our dream to do something very big in space, to have large deployable solar arrays and the ability to beam power. So with that, actually 2 months after we got the financing round, that was purely for the actuators. We actually got a European Space Agency project of 500,000 to develop an origami folded solar array. And with this ESA money, we actually were able to, in parallel to the actuators, build up also the capabilities with our first deployables.
Basically, the first pitch that got you the first money was with the actuators, not the solar arrays, right?
Yes, exactly. It was with the actuators, but also here, if I would see the first pitch and the pitch that got us the money, there were a lot of pitch versions in between, because it's the same with the product. It's like only if you start advertising it, if you start presenting, if you tell people about it, you realize what is actually working and what is not working. So there my suggestion would be here also be very open also to pivot. Be not too strict with it needs to be this, and this is the market, and this is the idea that I have. If no one else is believing in it, they're just stupid, so I still continue. So there needs to be also balance on finding what could be actually something that makes sense in the long run. And that's why I like having VC also on board, because they have seen quite a lot in the industry, but they also have seen other companies fail. And so I like to get this perspective, because otherwise I'm a trained engineer. We normally want to get like just the perfect product, and we think that our solution is the solution that everyone needs. But the VC investors challenge you to really, is that something that also the market needs? Because the good thing is, when you have a business that generates revenue and it could be profitable, then you are not relying on any grants, on any VC money, and then you can decide by yourself.
And how was your approach about choosing your first VC? Did you make a list of many investors that you were reaching out, or did you choose based on the locality? Because those investors were pretty local, right?
Back then I was completely new to the VC game. I didn't know how it works. I think it was like back in, I'm not sure if it was now 2018 or 2019. I actually took part in one of these business plan competitions. And when we submitted the first phase, ATGF got back to us and said, this is interesting. And actually we thought, okay, now this is, we get our investors, we get the money. So we already thought, now they write a check because they like it. Little that we know is that it took, I think, was 15 months to close the deal. So we were quite new. So we went to a couple of these investment events where we were pitching, but we were a little bit overwhelmed by the amount of investors that are out there. So the first round, we more concentrated on a few investors with the help of big. Also, we did a local accelerator that made personal intros. So at the end, we selected an investor where it fitted very well personally, because they helped us to get a pitch together that represents also a company that is investable. So that was our lead investor with ATGF. And then we only had to find a co-investor. Here, we also looked at many different, but it was also a huge coincidence how we found the one that we have now, because the funding round was taking a little bit longer. So we had to take a credit that was also offered through ESA-BIG. So we went to the local bank and to get this 50K credit. And then the bank assistant asked us, what we are doing. So we said, we are a startup doing space mechanism. And she was like, yesterday there were two people here that actually opened account for a new fund. And so she made the intro. The next day I went to them and they were like, love the idea. That's how we found our co-investor. And they are just 3 kilometers away from here. And they are really supportive, more like a business angels, helping us set up the company, helping set up the organizational structure, all the things that we didn't know before.
Okay, just to summarize this. So when you said you were overwhelmed by the amount of investors, what would be your advice here to the founders that might be around that time of trying to figure that out, who to work with? One thing is the personal feeling from the person that you talk with. What will be the next?
So yeah, we were overwhelmed by the amount because we looked too broad. We looked at all the investors that are out there. Also, if you type in Google investors, that's not very meaningful. So one recommendation that I would give is look around what companies are out there that are doing something similar to you. And see what investors they have. Normally, it's also on their webpage, and so already with that, you can do a short list. So
that's smart.
So with that, you also get, when you reach out to these companies, you get feedback on what is their opinion with these investors. So in our Series A round that we just concluded last year, we actually also did a due diligence by ourselves for all of the investors. And I was really looking into, okay, what kind of thought do they have? What kind of investments do they have? What are the companies? Do they actually have money to invest, or are they at the beginning or the end of their lifetime? And with that, we could really see, is that an investor that could fit with us? Because you also need to think that getting an investor is almost like a marriage. It will last most likely through the whole lifetime of the company, and if potentially also longer. So it's very important to have this good relationship, this good feeling with them, because you also need to confront them with bad news once in a while, and good relationship is just important for that.
Before we get into Series A that you just mentioned, I wanted to tap into 3 more things. First thing is, how did you actually spend your first money? How much was it back then when you got your first checks from ATGF?
So I think the first check we got was to K, and from ASA Big we got 25K for rent and advertising, and 25K for anything else. So the first money we actually had to spend on, were not able to be spent on salary, so we did not pay ourselves any salary for the beginning. So we spent actually most of the money in buying parts and tools. I think one of the biggest investments that we did was a 3D printer, like a professional 3D printer, where we don't need to repair it every couple of hours, but one that we could use longer. But then we also spent quite some money on travel to conferences when it was possible again with COVID.
And when you get your first VC investors on board, what were your spending priorities back then?
Spending priorities. There's always the problem when you get money. It also goes quickly, because as soon as you think, it's so much money, it actually goes very quickly. The main priorities for the investment money was to start paying salaries, of course, because we also started hiring people that were not the founders. And they at one point also want to get good salary, or not a internship salary and free pizza. So one of the main spending that we did was in test campaigns to really take our product through the paces, to really see, okay, how can it be broken? because it's better if it breaks with us than it breaks with the customer.
Regarding hiring, what was your hiring strategy if you had any back then?
So back then, it was mostly who can we afford? Because budget was very, very limited, especially when we are CIS funded. Because I think the scholarship was like 2.5K for every founder for salary, but then not much salary for all the new hires. So it was mostly, our strategy is who has the same mindset in us and who is willing to do crazy things with the vision that at one point there will be a bigger outcome. So
is that your hiring strategy right now too? Hasn't that changed?
So now, of course, we can pay average good salary, but it's still this mindset that needs to fit because, we need to face it. We are a startup. We are trying to compete with startups in the US, where the laws around employment are much softer than here in Germany, also regarding the bureaucracy, also just the amount of people and costs you have just around keeping a company running. But still, the mindset is very important because we all need to do our best to work towards one goal, to do something bigger. Because if you're just here to work for money, a 9-to-5 job, that's not a startup. Then you need to go into corporate. So you get a lot of responsibility here, can go very quickly, very high up, but it also means dedication.
That's one. Before we get into Series A round, what would be your highlight or highlights that you remember that you went through before you landed the 4 million round?
So one of the biggest highlights that's still in my mind is our first rocket launch with our products on it. So that was in 2023 in January, where we actually had a IoD mission, so in-orbit demonstration mission for our actuators. Because the thing is, if you don't demonstrate it in space, if you don't get a technology readiness level TRL 9, nobody buys it. So we had the IoD mission there, but also a customer, he needed 4 actuators that bought it, even though we did not have any flight heritage. So that mission was both our IoD and our first customer. And we actually rented in the middle of COVID the brewery next door. And so it was just for us. We had also the mayor here. Then we showed it on the screen when the time was counting down. It was completely quiet in the room. There was no 10, 9, 8. Everyone was just so tense. And then the rocket went up. And 1 hour after launch was the start of the release of all the satellites. And our device was used to release the satellites. So it was actually really announced from SpaceX. It's like, okay, the first satellite out. So we worked the second out, the third out. And then till the fourth, there was a little bit of time delay. And I was like, the friction was so high. Then they said, the fourth one also deployed, and the whole room was erupting like cheers. And with that, we had flight heritage. We had 4 successful products on SpaceX. We were at a brewery. So that was an amazing highlight.
Okay, so we get into Series A, where you scored 4.4 million euros. What was the preparation from your side? How did you get into that point? First, thinking that we need another round, and second, on more on the practical side of things, how do you actually prepare for it?
Yeah, so we had our first round in 2020, and then we got always by either with bigger institutional projects from the European Space Agency or bigger orders. But we also realized it was beginning of 2024 beginning of 2023 that if we want to be faster than our competition, especially with the deployables and also with the in-space manufacturing that we are doing back then. We need external money to really go fast. And the preparation that we did is we really looked at how we can make a story that can come together with the actuators that we have and the deployables that was then coming a little bit later. And also the more crazy idea with the in-space manufacturing. So also in 2023, we got more and more traction for our in-space manufacturing. Before the 4 years before that, everyone was telling to us, this is science fiction. This is too far away. But in 23 and 24, we actually got a lot of grants from the European Space Agency, Bavarian government, and the European Commission. And then it got actually into the forefront. And then when also investors really realized, okay, this is a disruptive technology that we in Europe can master. And so we actually also had to pivot in the middle of 23 to this in-space manufacturing. One preparation that we did together with our lead investor back then was to look at a list of investors that could be interesting, and then really make a strategy on how to reach out, where to meet them, where to pitch to them, who to pitch to, who we need to convince to, and how our startup could fit in their portfolio.
Interesting. Can you tell us more about this approach that you learned from them?
So the good thing is when you have investors on board, they know a lot of investors. So we had a session with each of our investors back then to really see what do they think would be a good investor fit. In parallel, we were going to all these events, the Viva Tech, the Bits and Pretzels, reached out to ESA Big to see what investors they can recommend, to really make a list, and also to rate the list on who should we contact. One who is our A player, who not so much, and then really have a coordinated reach out from us as the company, but also from the investor that is recommending us. What was also very good was reaching out through other companies. So we actually had a couple of our companies in the network. We saw that they have investors invested that we like. And with that, they could actually say, we are the customer of DCUBED. Their products are awesome. Do you want to jump in a call with them?
Okay, that's awesome. That's a very good cheat sheet
Yes.
for other founders. Is there anything else that you would like to mention that you would love to share with other founders from the community?
So one thing that was a big realization for me is that it actually only makes sense to fundraise in certain times of the year. Because what we realized is that you can actually, you need to consider the summer break and also the winter break. So you should try to either close in May or June or in middle of November. Because if you're not able to close in this time, then you get into the summer break, you lose 1 or 2 months because everybody is away, and then you need to start your fundraise. That's happened to us 3 times, that we did not miss, that we did not get to the deadline, because for us, then it was not so priority because we got a big order in. So I was like, okay, then we just do it after the summer. So keeping that in mind, and also knowing that the time is moving way faster than you think it is, hit the ground running on the first day of January to close the round in May, June.
Okay, now let's talk about future. Where is DCUBED going from now on? Where do you want to go in short and long term?
Short and long term. So in the short term, we are focusing on becoming a solution provider. So we are having commercially off-the-shelf products with our actuator solar array, but we realized that the customer, they don't want to buy a product, they want to buy a solution for the problem. So we are actually now having our own customer solution team that is helping every single customer to get the most of our products, because the space world is small and bad reputation travels quickly. And our idea is to just make the customer, if they vertically integrate, they should do it with us, because we are just delivering peace of mind. And in the long term, we want to bring more disruptive products out. So the in-space manufacturing is going quite well, but it also means it will be solar arrays, it will be antennas that don't look like the solar arrays and antennas that are existing up to now. So here we need to demonstrate it, get a picture from it in space, and then really show the customer, okay, it's not as crazy as you think. Here it worked. Here's the USP. Now let's fly it on your mission. And then in the long run, you can think of the space solar power.
I love that. I love how you're balanced in the technical acumen, at the same time how you're communicating your vision. Let's get into the last part, fireside questions, which means I will ask you a few questions, and if you can answer with an answer or two, that would be amazing. I'm very curious what are your thoughts here.
Happy to do that.
What is your most surprising due diligence question that you have got?
When we raised our first round was how deep they wanted to know about the competition and what is our revenue in 5 or 7 years. Because back then I was like, okay, it's just an idea. How should I know how our revenue is and our competition then? Yeah,
How
there's
did you
probably
answer on that,
more
by the way?
crazier questions that I just let it out.
How did you answer this one, by the way?
Looked at where I think would be the sales in 2 years. Then I multiply it by a factor. But now I realized that I was off by like a factor of 100 or so, because also back then when I was doing my first financial plan, I actually came to a point where I would need an investment of, I think it was like 100K to get profitable and to make revenues of, I think, like 1 million or so. And I was like, okay, this is not a VC case. This is not a real business case. This is someone did this assessment that just didn't have any clue what he was doing.
Okay, good answer. Next question. What was your worst investor meeting? Do you remember if you had any?
Yes, it was actually also in our first seed round. We were actually introduced by our lead seed investor, or hopeful lead seed investor, and it was a very big investment firm in Germany that was the investment company of the dreams. So we thought, but and then the question came, and they really wanted only to have unicorns. So to have billion euros valuation, and they were like taking our whole business case apart, and also our whole team and everything. And we felt it's really like crap after this meeting, because it's like, okay, why we are even having a startup? What actually was nice, which I think was the intention of our lead investor back then, or the hopeful lead investor, to get us back on the ground, to prepare us for the really important meeting in front of his whole committee then like a week later. Because then we're like, not like, we have it for sure. We are the best company. You all don't have any clue. You will give us the money for sure. It was like a aha moment. It was like, okay, we need to really work on our story, need to work on the questions, and be prepared for really painful ones.
Good answer. Okay. Next, I will get into the advice part. What is the best advice you have ever got that changed how DCUBE looks now?
Well, I think one of the best advice would be to go very quickly to market to really get a product out of there, and also to be not afraid of an outcome, is to just get started. So also one of our values is fast iteration, because if you're overthinking things, if you think, it's too difficult, it's too complicated, you will never start and you will never have a product. So for us, it's just like, okay, I have no clue. Let's just start and see where we are getting. So not trying to overthink everything till the end, because it's impossible.
That's a good one. Okay. What is the most German thing about your company?
The most German thing, the bureaucracy that we have with the contracts, with the hour booking, with the requirement of how many holidays needs to be taken. So that's on one hand but every German company needs to get through. So from us, I think it's like our Oktoberfest trips. So once a year we go with the whole company, and we also invite our customers from the States and so to the Oktoberfest. They all come in lederhosen, and that's very German.
Thanks so much for telling the story. It was super exciting. Do you have anything else that you would love to share with the founder community of other space founders?
About to say that space is awesome, get into space, but when you said it's space founders, the advice that I could give is not only focus on one country or one continent. The space industry is global, and there's a lot happening all around. So not focus too much on the small markets that we have here, but really look outside, and also be prepared to fail, because only if you fail, you learn something.
Awesome. Super. Thanks so much. Hope you enjoyed it as I did.
I did.
It was
Thank you,
a
Martin.
journey. It was a journey. Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Rocket and Radars. If you enjoyed this conversation with Thomas, don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, if you are an early stage founder working on something interesting in space or defense, my DMs are always open on LinkedIn. You will find a link in the show notes alongside key timestamps from today's conversation. Until next week, keep reaching for the stars. This is Martin, signing off.